If you've not looked at a digital watch since you're a kid and are feeling that nostalgic tug, or you're an avid collector of the latest hypebeast Casio reissue, or G-Shock, but haven't thought about vintage offerings, or even if you already collect vintage digital watches, this video will give you 4 reasons why you should go down the vintage digital watch rabbit hole. And for those already there with me, it may give you some new avenues to explore. By vintage, I'm not being black and white with my definition here, but generally I'm referring to anything between the 70s and the 90s, but the 2000s still had some pretty cool stuff where most of this applies. Unlike your shiny new hypebeast G-Shock Square, where its story is yet to be written, older models have a story behind them, that is, where they came from and what happened to the model afterwards. Unlike points in mechanical horological history, where you'll likely be attending an auction to get your hands on history, with digital watches, such examples are attainable, which gives me the first reason. Horological firsts, such as the twisted pneumatic LCD, the alarm, melody alarm, chronograph, radio-controlled watches. But an area I enjoy even more is where there's this unique crossover between digitals and other technologies, like, of course, the calculator, but also more interesting things like paging, vibrating when your mobile phone is ringing, MP3 players, and other such watches. Now, it's not just complications or technological examples that are part of the story. Companies themselves have stories intertwined with their digital watch catalogue, and this gives me my second reason. That is brand history. For example, Casio's first Casiotron, which marked their entrance into watches from the calculator wars, or Timex's recovery from their failed ventures into computing with Sinclair and doubling down with the Ironman triathlon. It may be companies that now have largely ducked out of the digital game, like Texas Instruments, who along with other electronics companies drove down the price of originally high-end pieces of technology before themselves being driven out. Seiko, major innovators in the early stage, much more so than Casio, but pulling out when things got tough. Citizen, with their major role in the first sensor watches, with still awesome Anadigi Temp. Orient, who were making amazing digitals in the 70s, but disappeared from the market, known to few, but digital watch nerds, with deeper cuts in the same vein being brands like Ricoh. Another fun example in the digital catalogue is that of current major luxury brands, for example Omega, who had some great innovation with their touchscreen watch. Go and explore your favourite brand, maybe they had a digital watch that they're trying to forget. For me, their digital range is an important piece in that company's history if you're a fan of their analogue watches. Now, at one point, digital watches were the technology of the future, signalling advancement of a country, so having homegrown versions was really a feather in the cap for technologically aspirational countries. And this gives me my third reason, the link of such watches into broader national and social history for particular countries and regions. For example, Soviet digital watches with the introduction of the Electronika 5, largely made in modern-day Belarus, regularly displayed themselves as tokens of technological innovation, for example in space missions. And digital watches made in communist East Germany by the GDR represent pieces of social history in their difference from watches in Western Europe, Japan and the US. This ruler digital watch, for example, was on the wrist of the GDR leader when he was in exile. The story of Swiss-made digital watches is another interesting one, with them being the architects for their own demise, with some of the last models in their catalogue being things like this yachting memo sale. The plethora of US watch brands in the digital game, including all of the interesting individuals of the day like Hughes, slowly capitulating to the inevitable squeeze of more efficiently produced watches from Japan and later China in the 80s, is another interesting case study that comes to life with watches. We even had our own guy in the game with Great Britain and Sinclair with the Black Watch, but we were sadly not really ever big players. You'll notice a key theme for me with these first 3 reasons is story and history. And now I've got one more reason that hopefully will push you over the edge if you aren't a history buff. That is what I've called finding treasure in others' trash. But there's almost always something to love about random old models, and you can get your hands on them cheap. You can often do this for free from friends who have them sitting in drawers from childhood. You can hunt them out at charity shops, car boot sales like the Mad Watch Collector recently did, and of course on eBay. And you get the same rush, well for me anyway, as you would getting a more expensive analogue watch at a fraction of the expense. Finding something interesting or unique in this way and sharing it with other enthusiasts is a super fun part of the hobby. Examples of where you can easily turn it into a magpie swooping up random examples that are outside of the more conventional brand specific or country specific reasons are children's watches, for example. Check out this Band for Life account with their interesting model reselling these types of watches. Promotional watches if you like films, TV programs, computer games, or there were the events of the past that you have a connection to. There was likely a digital watch connected to it in days gone by. Module hunting is another fun aspect. Many of these may not get much love from their aesthetics alone, but within the context of a hardcore collector trying to complete their set, these old models can get some love. The fun of finding treasure in this way is a big part of the hobby for me. These days, your choices for digitals are pretty much Casio, some Timex, and things like Braun, Nixon, or Freestyle. Maybe the connoisseur gets an ally. But with vintage, you've got oceans of different brands to pick from. Moreover, you've got the accumulation of 40 years plus of different discontinued models, as well as earlier iterations of things that you now know and love. If you're enjoying modern limited editions, there's a whole sea of limited editions from the past to explore. Therefore, it's hard to ever run out of options or angles to explore next, and you can always find something pretty unique. Hopefully, for those on the fence about getting interested in vintage digital watches, I've pushed you over that fence, and for those already with one foot in, perhaps you've got some new angles. Of course, there are more reasons, and would love to hear yours in the comments below, and if you've had your appetite whetted, I've got a whole bunch of more deep dive videos around the topic of digital watches, and do consider liking and subscribing. I hope you have a great rest of your day.